The whirring sound cut through the peaceful Saturday morning like a mechanical mosquito, persistent and invasive. Jake Miller knew that sound all too well. It was the drone again. He'd been trying to ignore it for weeks, but today was different. Today, the invisible line between privacy and harassment had been definitively crossed. Stepping out onto his back deck, Jake scanned the cloudless sky above his meticulously maintained suburban home. There it was, a sleek, dark gray quadcopter hovering just beyond his fence line, its camera lens pointed directly at his property. He could see it now, perfectly positioned to capture every single movement in his backyard. This wasn't the first time. For months, Margaret Holloway, the notorious HOA board president everyone in the neighborhood not so affectionately called Karen, had been making his life miserable. Her obsession with community regulations had transformed from mere bureaucratic enthusiasm to what Jake was now certain was full-blown harassment. The drone hovered, its mechanical eye unblinking. Jake knew exactly who was controlling it. Margaret lived 3 houses down, in a perfectly manicured corner lot that looked more like a museum exhibit than a lived-in home. Her pristine white house, with its razor-sharp hedges and color-coded flower beds, was a testament to her need for absolute control. Jake had moved into the neighborhood 2 years ago, excited about his first home purchase. A graphic designer who worked primarily from home, he'd spent months transforming his backyard into a creative sanctuary. He'd installed a beautiful wooden shed that doubled as a home office, planted a small vegetable garden, and even set up a modest workshop area where he could tinker with his photography equipment. But Margaret had been watching and waiting. It started with a warning letter about the height of his shed, then came complaints about the color of his fence stain. Each communication was meticulously typed with official HOA letterhead and highlighted sections pointing out supposed violations. Jake had tried to be diplomatic, attending HOA meetings and attempting to reason with her, but Margaret seemed to derive a perverse pleasure from finding fault with his property. The drone continued its surveillance, its low buzz a constant reminder of the ongoing conflict. Jake could see its camera rotating, capturing what he was certain would become another complaint. Maybe the slightly overgrown patch of wildflowers near his fence, or perhaps the recycling bins that weren't perfectly aligned. He clenched his fists, feeling a surge of anger mixed with a strange sense of violated privacy. This wasn't just about community rules anymore. This was personal. Margaret had crossed a line, and Jake was done being a passive participant in her power game. Little did Margaret know, Jake wasn't just a mild-mannered graphic designer. He had a background in electronics, a knack for problem-solving, and a growing determination to put an end to her invasive surveillance. The drone might think it was in control, but Jake was about to change that narrative, dramatically and permanently. Jake spent the next 2 days meticulously planning his counter-strategy. His background in electronics wasn't just a hobby. It was a weapon of precision he was about to deploy. Working late into the night in his home workshop, he researched drone interference techniques, signal jamming, and electronic countermeasures. His laptop screen flickered with technical diagrams and forum discussions from drone enthusiast groups. Jake wasn't just looking to stop the drone. He wanted to send a message. Each time Margaret's drone appeared, it felt like an invasion, a digital violation of the privacy he paid good money to enjoy. On Wednesday evening, his neighbor Tom dropped by, noticing the multiple electronic components scattered across Jake's workbench. "What are you cooking up?" Tom asked, his curiosity piqued by the array of circuit boards and modified radio transmitters. Jake hesitated, then decided to confide in his only sympathetic neighbor. "Margaret's drone has been constantly surveilling my property. I'm creating a way to neutralize it, legally and precisely." Tom whistled, half impressed, half concerned. "Be careful. HOA people can be vindictive. Remember what happened to the Petersons last year?" Jake nodded. The Petersons had been dragged through a months-long legal battle over a garden gnome that supposedly violated community aesthetic guidelines. Margaret had been the primary instigator in that fiasco, using her position on the board to make their lives miserable. What Margaret didn't know was that Jake had been documenting everything. Every drone flight, every invasive camera angle, every unexpected visit and complaint. He had a digital folder filled with timestamped photos, video recordings, and copies of all correspondence. This wasn't just about stopping a drone. This was about exposing a pattern of harassment. The final piece of his plan took shape on Thursday night. A custom-built signal disruptor disguised as an innocuous piece of backyard decor. To anyone else, it would look like a decorative solar light. To Margaret's drone, it would be a technological nightmare. Friday morning arrived with the familiar mechanical buzz. Jake was ready. As the drone appeared, hovering just above his fence line, he allowed himself a slight smile. The game of cat and mouse was about to change dramatically. Little did Margaret know her days of unchecked surveillance were numbered. Jake had transformed from a passive victim to an active strategist, and he was preparing to strike back in a way she would never expect. The HOA meeting was scheduled for the second Tuesday of the month, and Jake knew this was his moment. He arrived early, a meticulously organized binder tucked under his arm containing documented evidence of Margaret's relentless drone surveillance. The community center's meeting room buzzed with the typical suburban drama, whispered conversations, passive-aggressive glances, and an undercurrent of territorial tension. Margaret sat at the head of the table, her crisp white blouse and perfectly pressed blazer a stark contrast to the slightly rumpled residents around her. Jake strategically chose a seat near the back, observing the dynamic. He watched as Margaret ran through the meeting's agenda with military precision, her voice cutting through the room like a well-sharpened knife. Violation notices, landscaping regulations, and paint color approvals were delivered with the enthusiasm of a prosecutor presenting a case. When the open forum began, Jake raised his hand. "Ms. Holloway," he began, his voice calm and controlled, "I'd like to discuss a significant privacy concern in our community." He pulled out a series of printed photographs, time-stamped images captured by Margaret's drone, showing precisely how invasive the surveillance had been. The room fell silent. Photographs revealed the drone hovering near bedroom windows, capturing intimate backyard moments. A family barbecue, children playing, a private moment of relaxation. Each image was a damning piece of evidence, carefully annotated with GPS coordinates and exact timestamps. Margaret's composure began to crack. Her fingers, usually so precise, now trembled slightly as she shuffled through the documents Jake had distributed to the board members. "These are out of context," she stammered, her authoritative tone suddenly fragile. Tom, Jake's neighbor, spoke up from another part of the room. "Those look pretty clear to me, Margaret. Those are some serious privacy violations." Other residents began to murmur, sharing their own experiences. The Petersons, who had previously been silenced, now found their voice. Stories of similar harassment began to emerge: drone surveillance, nitpicky violations, constant intimidation. Jake had done more than prepare a defense. He had turned the tables, transforming from a single victim to the voice of an entire community that had been living in fear of Margaret's tyrannical HOA leadership. The meeting was about to become a turning point, and Jake was ready for whatever came next. The aftermath of the HOA meeting was nothing short of a neighborhood earthquake. Margaret was temporarily suspended from the board pending an investigation, and Jake found himself thrust into an unexpected spotlight. Neighbors he'd barely spoken to before now stopped him during morning walks, offering support and sharing their own stories of Margaret's long-standing harassment. But Margaret wasn't going down without a fight. The very next weekend, her drone returned, more aggressive than ever. This time, it wasn't just hovering. The device seemed to be deliberately flying closer to Jake's windows, its camera lens pointed directly into his home office. Jake realized she was attempting to provoke him, to catch him doing something, anything, that could be used against him. His custom signal disruptor was ready. As the drone approached, Jake activated the device he carefully concealed in a decorative garden light. The quadcopter began to wobble, its stabilization systems suddenly confused by the targeted electronic interference. Margaret, controlling the drone from her pristine living room, wouldn't understand what was happening. The drone started to lose altitude, its mechanical whir becoming erratic. Jake watched with a mixture of satisfaction and calculated precision. This wasn't about destruction. This was about sending a clear message. Then something unexpected happened. The drone's trajectory began to shift dramatically. Instead of simply falling, it was heading directly toward Margaret's backyard. More specifically, her pride and joy. An immaculately maintained in-ground swimming pool that was the envy of the neighborhood. Jake realized he could either stop the drone or let physics take its course. He chose to let physics win. With a spectacular splash, the drone plummeted directly into the center of Margaret's crystal blue pool. The impact sent water spraying in all directions, destroying the pool's pristine surface and shorting out the expensive surveillance device. Jake's phone buzzed almost immediately. It was Margaret, her voice trembling with rage. "You! This is your doing." "I'm not sure what you mean," Jake replied calmly. "Seems like a technical malfunction to me. These things happen with drones, right?" The irony was perfect. Margaret had spent months trying to find a way to get Jake in trouble, and now she was the one facing potential legal and HOA repercussions for her invasive surveillance. As he hung up the phone, Jake couldn't help but smile. Sometimes justice arrives in the most unexpected ways, with a splash. The fallout was swift and decisive. Within 2 weeks, Margaret faced multiple consequences for her drone surveillance campaign. The local police issued a warning about privacy violations, and the HOA board, now with several new members, conducted a thorough review of her conduct. Jake found himself an unexpected hero of the neighborhood. Residents who had previously suffered in silence now approached him, sharing stories of Margaret's years of micromanagement and harassment. The Petersons, in particular, were grateful for the stand he'd taken. A formal hearing was called, and Jake was asked to present his evidence. His meticulously documented file, complete with time-stamped photos, drone flight records, and a comprehensive timeline of harassment, became the centerpiece of the investigation. Margaret's attempts to discredit him only made her look more desperate. The final blow came from an unexpected source. Tom, Jake's neighbor, revealed he worked for a local tech security firm and had independently verified the extent of the privacy violations. His professional testimony carried significant weight, providing technical credibility to Jake's claims. Margaret was removed from the HOA board permanently. Her drone, now a soggy wreck at the bottom of her pool, became a neighborhood joke, a symbol of her downfall. More importantly, the community began to implement new guidelines protecting residents' privacy and limiting the use of surveillance technology. Jake didn't seek revenge, he sought justice, and in doing so, he had transformed not just his own situation, but the entire neighborhood's dynamics. Months later, a new HOA board was elected, one committed to fairness, transparency, and respect for individual property rights. Jake was even approached about joining the board, though he politely declined. His point had been made. The drone incident became a cautionary tale, not just about the dangers of unchecked surveillance, but about the power of standing up to bullies, even those hiding behind official titles and clipboards. As for Margaret, she eventually sold her house and moved to another neighborhood. Jake heard rumors that she was already trying to join that community's HOA board. Some people, it seemed, never learned. But in this neighborhood, things were different now. Neighbors talked to each other. They looked out for one another, and no one, absolutely no one, would be allowed to weaponize community rules as a tool of personal harassment again.